Hey, and welcome to another tutorial on SINEE Global. Today we're going to dive into the world of sequences. So I'm going to show you 3 different techniques. Let's dive in. So the first method we're going to have a look at today is involving one of my favorite Max for Live devices, which is called Granulator. And Granulator just had an update in Live 12. And we're going to talk more about these updates in upcoming videos. But for today, I'm just going to treat Granulator like the version before. I just loaded a random sample in here. Can be any synth sequence sample you have in your library, doesn't really matter. And I'm going to sequence it with my favorite sequencer over here, which is the ML185. I have a random sequence going on, and let's listen to this. So right now it's nothing spectacular really, and we're gonna try to change that, of course. So the first thing I did is I put in a chord device, and as you can see, I have it shifted -6 semitones. Let's hear what that sounds like. So I really like the dissonant timbres you can get out of this by shifting a certain amount of semitones and just ignoring whatever scale you're in. I also have a slight bit of swing engaged here, like 15% on the sequencer. And the first other thing I'm gonna introduce is an EQ, just to dip out a little bit around maybe 700 Hertz, 800 Hertz, up to 1K. It really depends on your sound. The EQ8 we have here, we're gonna ignore that for now. I'm gonna come back to this later. And then I have an amp here. Let's listen to what that does. I would like to have it a little bit more refined. So what I did is I created a dummy clip, and as you can see here, I'm telling the clip to turn the amp device on and off at certain points within my sequence. And that sounds like this. After that, we have a soothe, just to tame a little bit of the harsh frequencies in the mid-range. And then I have a compressor and some delay. Let's listen to everything at once. And that sounds cool already, in my opinion, but you can take this concept even further by just duplicating this clip here. And let's say we want to have it running over 8 bars. It automatically copied all the automation on the amp device. So that's what I want. And now we're coming back to the EQ8, because with all these possibilities we have regarding automation, I think sometimes it's easy to forget that we can do stuff by hand as well. And that will create some very organic movement indeed. So let's turn on this EQ8, and I have one band here with a relatively moderate Q factor, and I'm gonna modulate this by hand and record it into this clip. And by the way, this is something I have to remind myself of all the time. Just, keep doing things by hand from time to time, and maybe use less LFOs. And you can come up with some really cool stuff, I think. Moving on to the next one, which is just a simple 2-operator FM sound. Sounds like this. So nothing fancy at all. I just have an operator going to my main carrier, and it's at a fixed frequency of 100 Hertz and a moderated level as well, minus 11 dB. There's no filter engaged, there's no pitch envelope, nothing going on really in the background. They're all just simple sine waves. And now let's see what we can do with this sequence to make it even more interesting. So the first thing, despite the fact that I just told you it's nice to do things by hand from time to time, is I loaded in an LFO and I mapped it to the frequency here, and it's just a teeny tiny amount. You can see the depth right here, and the rate is relatively slow. I also put a shifter on this track. You can see here the spread is set to wide, and I shifted it down a little bit, and we can see in the LFO I mapped it to this parameter as well. So just a tiny amount, you can see it moving here. After that, time for a little bit of distortion. For this I used the new raw device, but of course you can use everything you have at hand. This is just there to make the sound a little bit more gritty. After that, a little bit of side chaining, another EQ to take out this nasty frequency about 5K. Next in line we have one of my favorite filters. You know this from past videos, this link filter. And you can see the stereo mode is engaged, and I have the ripple turned quite high. So we have all this delicious movement going on. And maybe let's engage also our send and return effects, because that will make all the difference. Last but not least, we have an EQ8 just to narrow down the frequency range so it works better with our track. And let's listen to this with some drums. And I really love the new feature in Ableton 12 that whatever you modulate is not going to be taken over by the modulation source. You can still move the fader or the knob in question. There's quite a lot of variation you can achieve by just playing with parameters like the frequency or maybe the multiplier. Maybe even take the fixed off. And if you take into account the vast possibilities you have with operators, so choosing different waveforms, for example, adding even more operators on top, yeah, sky's the limit really. And this brings us to our last example for today, which is quite a special little thingy for me. I loaded the same sample in 5 different drum pads in drum rack here, and you can see the only difference really is in the attack phase of those samples and also the pitch. And by the way, the sample I used is in the Ableton library. It's called Sonar Submarine. I just want something bleepy and I found it. So let's have a listen to what this sounds like dry. Also, let's have a look at the clip. This is something I just penciled in randomly and shifted the notes until I got something that I liked. And then we have a phaser right behind it. The dry wet amount is on 34%, so it's quite subtle, but you can hear what it's doing. After that, I decided I want to change the frequency response pretty drastically. So I put on a shifter. Sounds like this, and a little bit of sidechaining after that. And of course, these sounds, as always, come to life when you put some reverb and delay on them. And again, let's have some drums. And since we're not really working in any musical scales, rather than trying to carve out the timbres we like, chances are that the stuff we made earlier, like the sequence on operator, will fit our existing track as well. Thanks for watching, and as always, make sure to check out sine.de. I'm gonna see you soon. Take care.